Appreciate it. Jeffrey Rosen, let me turn to you. You are an expert in constitutional law. The ACLU put out a statement in reaction to Kimmel's suspension, saying that this moment represents a, quote, grave threat to our First Amendment freedoms. What are your thoughts today?
The networks are private companies, and in some sense, they can have on whoever they want. However, there is a Supreme Court precedent saying that the government cannot pressure private companies to punish individuals because of their speech. And there are two cases in particular that were decided in 2024 that suggest that Kimmel possibly could have a Supreme Court case if he could establish that ABC was acting in response to the government's threats. In particular, the court held in a case called Vulo that New York couldn't pressure insurance companies not to do business with the National Rifle Association because that was punishing the NRA because of their speech. And there was a second case called Murtha that held that the Biden administration couldn't jawbone or pressure social media companies to take down COVID speech that they called misinformation. So with those two cases, you know, the head of the FCC got up and said that we're going to do something about Kimmel's speech. And if Kimmel could prove that ABC acted in response to the FCC's threats under those two Supreme Court cases, he might actually have a claim.
Well, I guess the question is, where is the line drawn? That line between, look, this is a private company versus you're violating someone's First Amendment rights.
Exactly. And it's a very hard line to draw. Even in that case involving social media companies, the Supreme Court said, well, it's not clear that the media companies were really acting in response to Biden's threats. If they were acting on their own, they're allowed to do that. And here we had the head of ABC say this was a purely business decision. So ABC is going to claim they were not acting in response to government threats. And in fact, the timing of the threat suggests that it may have come even after the firing. So these are not easy to prove factually, but just let's remember the basic principle in America. The government can't punish people because of their speech, because of criticisms of the government. That goes back to just after the American Constitution was drafted and the Adams administration passed a sedition law, making it a crime to criticize the president. And Thomas Jefferson said that's unconstitutional. And about a century later, the Supreme Court agreed. So that's the backdrop of all this. Proving it in practice before a court might be difficult, but that's why it's such an extremely serious time for free speech in America.
So could this potentially be the start of a slippery slope when it comes to the government censoring what people can and cannot say? Right now, there's a Republican in the White House. At some point, there's going to be a Democrat in the White House. What's to say that the Democratic president won't take action against conservative hosts?
That's exactly the fear. And that's why a bedrock principle of our First Amendment is that the government cannot punish people because of their speech. It's complicated in a media age where speech platforms are controlled by private companies and they have business interests that are separate from these free speech interests. But the fear is that the government could indeed, by pressuring private companies to fire its critics, do exactly what the framers of the Constitution hoped that they would not do.
What are you going to be watching for moving forward, specifically with this Jimmy Kimmel case, but more broadly, as the administration says they may take action against liberal organizations?
I'll be looking to see whether organizations, liberal, conservative, or just media organizations, because that's really what we're talking about now, whether any of them stand up behind their reporters and the people who are appearing and back them up rather than firing them. Some of the newspapers have tried to do that. President Trump has sued the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Both of them have refused to back down. By contrast, law firms have tended to make deals with President Trump. But when it comes to the media, it's a very important question, and the ultimate decision is going to be in the hands of the people who run our media companies themselves.
Well, Jeffrey Rosen, we really appreciate your insights in helping us unpack this and understand this urgent moment a little bit better. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.